Today, I'm joined by James Murphy. James joined his local infantry regiment and began a promising career before an incident in Afghanistan changed his career trajectory completely. James's planning for a life post-military was truly meticulous, and his position now as the CEO of Techbets is the culmination of an outstanding demonstration of determination and planning. James, thanks very much for coming on today. It's really great to have you.
Look, a real pleasure. We had a great chat the other day. I'm looking forward to it.
So if we take the story right back to the beginning, so young James wants to join the army. What brought that about?
Crikey. I suppose at that point I was probably a 28-inch waist as well. That's quite a while ago. So I was always into sport. You know, I grew up in South Suffolk, and there was a lot of sport in that local area. So I did sort of county level for a number of different sporting teams, and loved cross country, and I was quite fit. So I decided that the military was for me, and I actually went for the Royal Marines to start with. I went to the PRMC in Lympstone. I was running, I was number 2 in South England at that point for cross country, and piled in at the end of day 1. I went back again and failed the second time. I was a bit too small, and they said, put on some poundage and come back in 2 years when you're 18. And so I didn't want to wait. So I went downstairs in the AFCO and joined the army. And really good decision. I went into the Royal Anglian 1st Battalion. But to start with, I got myself through Harrogate, which was the sort of school leavers at the time. And then on to Catterick, and then into my battalion. I think I ended up joining my battalion in 2001.
Wow, awesome. So then how did you find training when you turned up to Harrogate? How was that?
It was certainly different. I think when you're thrust into a sort of environment that's full of people you don't know, full of processes and sort of organisational structures that you've never ever come across, and again, it was quite a testosterone heavy environment where you're always willed on to do more and more and keep achieving and be a man and get a grip of yourself and all that sort of good stuff. And that early level exposure really starts the building blocks for things like personal resilience to deal with challenges. So it was really good. And I met a lot of people, and I was able to pick up some sporting stuff. I was number 1 in Harrogate for running, and I kind of loved that I've been able to pick that back up. But the military side of it was fun. It was really nice to learn all these weapon systems and the tactics and get in the field and get onto exercise. Not so nice having to sort your locker out and be shouted at and whatnot.
Yeah, the old locker inspections were always a special treat, weren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Frantically hiding any chocolate bars that you've got, trying to put them inside socks as you roll your socks up to the perfect angles adjacent to the t-shirts that you've used paper in to fold nicely so it looks like it's come out of a catalogue.
Yeah, I remember all that good stuff. So then, how was life when you joined battalion?
Yeah, it's good. What was quite nice, I joined a local infantry unit. I was part of the 1st Battalion Royal Anglian Regiment, and interestingly, straight away I met 2 or 3 guys that went to the same secondary school as me. I didn't even realise they'd joined the military. A few years ahead of me at school. So it was good. It had that nice sort of regional feel to it. Again, I was able to crack on and do a load of sports. But then at the same time, you're thrust into the real world of being a soldier. And in the infantry, that was a pretty stark wake-up call. At the same time, really, really interesting. I got to do some really cool stuff.
How long did you have before you ended up on your first op tour?
Not that long. It was Northern Ireland. So I deployed to Northern Ireland under Op Banner back in, it was the final couple of years. So a lot of the work we did was supporting the PSNI with the sort of counter-smuggling sort of stuff. People getting the illegal fuel and contraband over the border from Southern Ireland. But that was, it's a fairly quiet tour. So it was a good exposure to operations as a first one, I suppose. And that was 2002, I think it was around Christmas time, 2002. So it was my first Christmas away from home. And, we were on a 2-cam rule, so there wasn't really much celebrating going on out on tour. But yeah, really good. Saved up a bit of money, spent it all on my first bit of leave after the tour with everyone else.
Standard?
Yeah, really, really good. Really good.
Yeah, there wouldn't have been any more sort of tours like that since around that time, really.
No.
The dynamic of tours changed quite quite significantly.
Yeah, and even at the time, so my battalion had deployed to Op Fingal, which was the Kabul Afghan tours of early days. So that stuff was already happening at that point. And then I suppose after that, it wasn't that long after that I ended up, I spent too long as a private soldier, really. I was happy sorting my kit out every week and, just you're trying to be a good soldier, I suppose. And then it got to the point where, I pulled my finger out, did my junior pre-NCO card and became a Lance Corporal. But as it transpired, I did that, finished that in sort of July 2006, and went straight on to Junior Brecon for my next promotion course in the January 2007. And I finished that, passed that in April, went straight out to Afghan to join my battalion on their first Op Herrick tour in Herrick 6. That was a huge experience, but not a very long one. As my wife likes to say to me, you didn't really deploy on operations in Afghan. It was more like a holiday. You were there for 6 weeks. Because that was the tour where I unfortunately got on the wrong end of RPG shrapnel, and nothing serious, but yeah.
So what happened there?
So I deployed later than everyone else. So actually, everyone else was far more established on the ground. But we had the Ross Kemp series, which was my company, and he left the operation after that. We were on the ground. We were putting in some offensive operations first thing in the morning. I led my team over a bit of ground. We got into an irrigation ditch and an RPG got fired. It hit the front bank of the ditch we were in, and then the brunt of it was taken by one of our guys. No one lost their lives, thankfully. But that was the point that really, whilst it was a really bad situation, it was probably the best thing personally that happened to me, because it kick-started an entire shift in my frame of mind and how I approached my own career and my own life, generally speaking. I remember being carted off the ground, dragged back. I remember the guy saying, "We're really sorry about this," and I said, "Oh no, it's fine." And then I realised why, and it was bumpy irrigated sort of fields, which was hard, mud, and I was just bobbing along on top of it as they were dragging me away. But it wasn't anything super serious. It was just soft tissue, but there was a lot of damage, so I couldn't really move my legs. A lot of tissue damage, just ligament damage, tendons, all that sort of good stuff. My knees were pretty fried, but it was quite bizarre because it was a bit like a car crash. It happened, and then there was a lot of dust, and and everyone's a bit confused. And I remember being sat up against a wall, and the medic was dealing with us, and I didn't want any morphine because for some bizarre reason I thought that everyone was going to hack off my legs, and that was it. I was going to be left without them. It was nowhere near that serious. It was just the frame of mind I was in. And then once everyone got back at the end of the tour, they said, "Oh, it was quite close because rounds were hitting the wall a couple of inches from your head." And you don't really realise at the time the Chinook was swerving to avoid RPGs that was taking off with me in it. But the placebo effect is definitely a real thing, and I remember being laid in the heli, and someone said, "Oh, we're going to give you some morphine," and they literally put it in my arm, and at that split second, I kind of like drifted off into almost a coma-induced sleep, thinking that stuff had already kicked in. But that was it. I was 3 days in Bastion, went back, load of physio, Headley Court. And then I went to Catterick as an instructor. I was one of the first, I think there was only 2 of us at the time that had been injured in operations, like that had been instructors at Catterick. So, that was an interesting time, and a lot of questions. I always remember at one point someone said to me, "Look, I've heard that you got hit with an RPG, shrapnel, and how was it?" And I said, "Look, I don't know where you've heard this from." I said I was actually working in the officers' mess, and morale was low, so they wanted to give the guys the medals early. So they shipped me out there, and I was in my service dress, in ammo boots, and carrying a silver tray of medals. And as I went down the ramp for the Herc, I slipped and hit my legs, and because I had a silver tray, everyone was ragging me, saying it was shrapnel. And then a couple of days later, I could hear someone on a table in the cookhouse, a couple of tables away, saying, "Oh, do you know about that guy Murph? Yeah, it wasn't shrapnel. He was in the officers' mess." It's brilliant.
I love it. That's brilliant.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's good.
Exactly the sort of thing that like recruits would lap up as well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was good, and I learned a lot. Training those recruits. Some of them come from some pretty interesting backgrounds, very diverse backgrounds, and certainly have lived lives that I certainly was never exposed to, thankfully. But great guys coming through, and it was great to be part of that process where you take someone on who may have not had the best start in life, and at the end of it, you're turning them into these professional soldiers that then go on to have great careers. And I think that's really good position. But I realised at that point that my future in the infantry was pretty much not going to go much further. So I had to make a decision, and I did look at leaving the military. And I remember returning to my battalion, and there was a guy called Major Matt Wooderson, who was my new company OC, and he said, "Look, why don't you consider doing the intelligence stuff for the upcoming tour?" And I did. I went and did the tactical intelligence course, and I loved it. And I really fell in love with the fact that I was getting access to information that I didn't really know about. I liked the fact that I was blowing open the huge gaps in my own knowledge and understanding of what was happening in the world. I liked using the grey matter, which I hadn't used since school, not properly anyway, in an academic sort of way. So I decided to transfer to the intelligence corps, and I started the process, did the 2-day selection course, and then after that, deployed on this tour as the intelligence person for Ops Company in Nadi Ali, and it was a real eye opener, really interesting tour. But when I came back and I went onto that sort of transfer course, it was relatively easy. 13 years of experience at that point, and when they're asking you to do an intelligence summary and you've been pushing them out every day for 6 months in operations, it was really easy. But I liked it, and from that point, I really understood what my exit strategy was going to be from the military. I was told I would be able to promote, but my injuries prevented me from promoting from that point onwards.
When you said you realised your time in the infantry was done, so that was like the end of your posting at Catterick, and was that just because you weren't going to be able to get through senior Brecon?
I wasn't really interested, and look, commendable pathways for people that are interested in going through the sort of motor transport departments or the signals departments, or not necessarily the signals, more the sort of stores and QMs departments, and I get that, but it wasn't for me. The one impact that my injury really did have, the negative impact, was I had to pretty much give up all the sports that I was doing.
Yeah.
And I was number 2 in the army when I deployed on that tour, with every aspiration and actually a high probability that I would be in the combined service team for cross country. And to stop doing all the sports, football, cricket, tennis, everything, it was a bit of a kick in the gut. But then additionally, I didn't want to pursue that infantry career if I couldn't stay as what I saw as that sort of central,
the primary function. Yeah,
primary function. So that was the decision point. When I moved across to the intelligence corps, initially I did think, look, I mean, I had a runway where I could have quite easily hit WO2, but could have possibly hit WO1 and then LE commissioned, and that was my goal. Within about 6 months of being in the in corps, I knew that wasn't going to be possible. Well, I started to get the rumblings it wouldn't be possible. I came off the promotion board within the first year, which was almost unheard of. Usually you have to wait 2 years. And then subsequently every year that I served in the Inc. Corps for the remainder of my 19 years, I came off the promotion board every year. But because I couldn't do the green skills course, I can't kneel down. Even now I'm training for the marathon, but kneeling down is disgustingly horrible because there's so much damage to my knees, certainly around the patellar tendons. And, they wanted me to do things like carry a casualty for 80 meters, and I'm like, look, it's in books. You can read Attack State Red where we were, ferrying people 5Ks under fire, but they wouldn't take that, obviously, as a solution. So the moment I knew that was it, I then realised that I had basically the rest of that first 2 years to get my feet properly under the table, and established in the intelligence corps, and then 5 years exit strategy, and that's what I did. And I created a sort of campaign plan of how to deliver that, what I needed. And, I achieved my degree. I got a first class honours degree in international intelligence and international relations. I did about 11 different courses in my first year, first 18 months in the Inc. Corps. And, started networking really, really hard. I went to a lot of conferences and conventions with industry where it was relevant to the job, but at the same time there was also that sort of personal value for building that network. And I had some really good jobs. I managed to get out to China, supporting defence engagement, supporting the defence attaché with intelligence support for Southeast Asia, working in the embassy in Beijing. I even passed my HSK level 1 elementary sort of Mandarin, had 12 hours worth of tuition and managed to get that passed while I was out there. Lost it all within about 10 days of coming back. Yeah. I could say hello and count to 10, and everyone was like, "Well, did you actually pass it?" I've got the certificate. That's it. Then I finished with a really, really good job where I was managing intelligence requirements for 4 or 5 regions across the world. And at that point, I realised that I was onto a good thing. I'd been offered some additional work on a retainer from an ex-military person. It wasn't customer facing; it was just to support what they were doing to help them understand how to do intelligence requirements management. And I didn't get that approved. And because it wasn't approved, at that point I thought, well, I've just lost out on an additional £1,200 a month. Plus, I can't promote, so I'm now ready. So I pushed a med discharge because my whole career had been stumped by my injury. Got that approved and left with a med discharge. And I always remember my boss at the time, one of the best managers I've ever had, and he said, "Look, if we could get you promoted tomorrow, would you stay?" And I said, "No." I said, that ship sailed. He said, "Well, what would make you stay?" And I said, "If I could run the entirety of defence intelligence, then I would stay." And he said, "Well, that's a 3-star, 2-3-star job." And I said, "I know, I get that, but I know that I could do something like that if I was given the opportunity. And I think the ceilings are just too low for me, and I need to go." And they were really good, really good. And that was it. And I had 3 months, but because of my comprehensive plan and my networking, I was in a really good place. And I also, that was around September 2018. I'd already been networking loads. One of those introductions put me in touch with Peter Connolly, who's one of the co-founders of Techbets, and he got me set up on Techbets as a member. And I spoke to a guy who I'd worked with back in the day in the intelligence school. I say back in the day, 2-3 years prior to that, the intelligence school, who was leaving a role at Government Digital Service as head of cyber threat intelligence. And whilst he couldn't give me the job, he said, "Look, I'm leaving. This would be good for you." I applied for that and managed to get it. And that was it. That was my move out into the big world.
So let's talk about the 5-year plan. What did that look like?
So the one thing that I really wanted to consider was the family side of things. My wife had to move around with me, as had my youngest. So it was making sure that we picked the right place to settle down, and to make sure that they were happy with my decision. My wife, not my youngest, was too young for that. Although he would have probably, as long as it revolved around gaming, he would have been all right. But my wife had that broken career, and we had that discussion. We decided that Folkestone would be a good place. Her family are in Folkestone, and that fitted with my plan because I knew there was lots of opportunities in London, and it's a 55-minute commute from Folkestone on the high speed. And then there was lots of other planning around things like the financial side of things. We'd need a house because we've been living in service families accommodation. I knew that I was going to get a chunk of money from my med payout, so we were happy that we'd be able to have the deposit on a house that was at least going to get us started. But the other things that I wanted to figure out were, I suppose, for a job, there were 3 things, and I've blogged about this since I've been out, created a 5-part blog series on making that decision as a career changer, with the emphasis focusing on service leavers, ideally. Because lots of people don't necessarily consider some of the additional bits. I remember nearly doubling my salary when I left, and one of the guys said, "Oh, amazing, you must be rolling in it." And I said, "Look, I've gone from paying £250 a month for a house and walking to work, which takes 5 minutes, to paying £800 a month for a house and £735 a month to get to work." He like spat his drink out, and and I said, "But that's the thing, and it doesn't stop there, because I'm not working with people where we can go down to the Naffy and get a coffee every now and then, or whatever. I'm going out and having coffees with people 2, 3, 4 times a week, and I'm getting coffee on my way to work, and there's team lunches, and I end up paying sort of anywhere between 80 and £200 a month on food and coffees, not to mention the beers for the after works drinks and but the networking drinks. And you know this better than I do with your experience in tech. There's a lot of these tech events, and they're really a lot of them are really useful. And a lot of them will have some free booze, but there's always the beers before and after. And you end up actually that you don't make that much of a difference in your salary, even if you're doubling it. To be fair, so the cost of living was something that I'd taken into account. But all I did was start networking with people with very little knowledge on where I would fit, what I would find interesting and useful. And I thought, I wouldn't mind getting into security risk management. I would love to be, or I'd love to be in a really big, fintech, or finance sector or corporate environment, like sort of a consultancy, like the big four. But as those 5 years, started, I'm moving through those 5 years, and the more people I spoke to, the more I learned about me, what I wanted, where I wanted to be, what type of organisation I wanted to be part of. And I think that's a trick that people miss with their networking. They focus it absolutely 100% on, it's going to get me a job. Well, fine, it might. That may be a wonderful side bonus that you get through your networking, and likelihood, that will be the case. But it's that whole process of learning more about what's out there, what you want to do, what size and type of company, what culture, what tech stack are they using, what's the office like. You can go to somewhere like Immersive Labs and you walk through and it's you just feel it. It's a really nice internal culture. They've got scooters on the floor plate. They've got a barista doing coffees, when you want them, and but it's really cool. And if that's what you're into, and you like dressing down and being part of that tech environment, that's the kind of place that you start to discover through your networking. And I was methodical on it, and my networking was a second job. I had a spreadsheet which had one tab for targets and another for people that I'd spoken to. So I didn't double tap, and I came very close to sending two people my CV a second time at one point, which is why I then became even more methodical. But that was it, and I was looking for various people, and so I got banned on LinkedIn twice for because they thought I was a recruiter, because I sent out hundreds and hundreds of messages where I was searching for types of job roles, and in the search though I would add in previous company, British Army, Royal Air Force, Royal Navy, or Ministry of Defence, and it was giving me veterans in these roles in companies, in departments or roles that I would be interested in, and I was just hitting them up with private direct message. This is me, it's what I'm about, it'd be great to have coffee. And what I started doing was using my leave. So I would book meetings in London with 4 or 5 people a day, 4 or 5 days a week. It was exhausting because the amount of revision that you have to do and research into all those different companies and those individuals every night before you then go in, because they're essentially interviews. They're less formal interviews. But and that was the most tiring part of my life. But it was worth it. I built some very good relationships, got some really good connections with people into companies, and it led me down that path that eventually got me to where I was a Techbets member and found my job at GDS. And it's civil service, so you have to go through that same process as everyone else. There's no warm referral or anything like that really, other than I knew the guy, so I could ask him about the job, and he couldn't give me anything that anyone else couldn't have had if they'd have asked the same questions. But GDS was different. The only reason I joined GDS, I wouldn't have gone to any other part of government. It was very non-gov in its feel. Everyone was in shirts and t-shirts and shorts and flip-flops, and it was MacBooks, and it was just agile. It was a nice office space. It wasn't in a gov building. Outside Aldgate, they had a bar downstairs. It just had a really good feel to it, and they'd managed to bring in a lot of very, very good, very capable young tech talent, and they were doing some cool stuff. And doing the cyber threat intelligence for the part of the cabinet office that's responsible for sort of Gov UK and all that sort of good stuff. It was good. It was a slight continuation. I felt like I was having a bit of impact, but it was at that point though that I realised that I couldn't go too technical. I'd gone into a position where I was slightly more senior, and I wasn't as interested in learning the technical skills. I preferred the people management, project program, that sort of stuff. So I started volunteering for the co-founders of Techbets. I went and gave a talk to Penny Mordaunt and Jeremy Hunt when Jeremy was pitching for Prime Minister. Gave talks at various resettlement events, set up the first local chapter, the London chapter within Techbets Discord, and hosted the first regional local event. And I really loved it. It was something about that organisation that it just gripped me straight away. The principled approach, the exposure to tech, but that was it. Yeah. But GDS was really good. I liked it. The salaries are good there, better than most other parts of government. The pension contribution is amazing. I always remember leaving GDS for Techbets and having less than a grand's pay rise. Going from 37 hours a week to sometimes 90 because I was on my own in a startup non-profit, and having my pension drop from a 24% contribution to a 3% contribution. But it was the impact. It was the purpose with Techbets was really, really cool.
So how long were you doing GDS and the Techbets volunteering for?
Not that long, 14 months. So it's my first 14 months out. And I suppose the role in GDS, when you look at the sort of grading, and I know some people sort of turn their nose up at the sort of way that they make those equivalent positions in MOD, but it was a step up because it would have been what they would see as the responsibility level as a full colonel. And going from a sort of corporal level, I was lucky that I was managed well in my final years in the military, and given the responsibility to do stuff. And it was a nice step up, but not too big a step up. And I found straight away at GDS, there is a reason why people talk about the valuable soft skills of people coming out of the military. I mean, it is clearly evident. There were girls and guys in that team that were so incredible at what they did, but my strength was working with people, and that was really clear. To be able to build relationships, to be able to, manage vendors, and cross-team stuff. That was easy. To manage individuals, to make sure that they had a career pathway ahead of them. They had objectives. They were reported on as well as they could be. All of that came from my military background. The decision making, the accountability, the resilience to change. All of that stuff I found was really easy, just natural, to be honest, given my nearly 2 decades in the military. And I'd always undervalued those skills until I left and got into that job. And additionally, because it was civil service, I was in central London, every evening I had the opportunity to go and network with companies, people, go to events, etc. And I really made the use of that. What I was doing also then started to complement what Techbets were doing anyway, so it added to the sort of volunteering stuff. I always remember one of the co-founders, sadly, who passed away 2 years ago yesterday, Mark Milton. He was sort of my mentor at that point, and he was my main point of contact with the Techbets co-founders. Incredible tech pioneer of his time. I always remember him coming to me with a message, sending me a message and saying, James, there's this opportunity that you might be interested in. What are your salary expectations? And at that point, I was on a decent enough salary, easy hours, really. Civil service, you're not stretched like I am at Techbets. It was 37 hours a week, no weekend work. Pension contribution was amazing. The commute was easy because it was all gates. It was straight to, Folkestone to St Pancras is 55 minutes and then 15 minutes on the Metropolitan. And I said, look, to get me to move from here, it's going to take a lot. So I'm not going for anything less than 6 figures. And it was because I wasn't particularly interested, I thought I'd go big. And I thought he had an opportunity from someone he knew. And then, roll on sort of month or so later, and he said, look, that role that I was on about, we're going live with we've got some funding to bring in the first Techbets CEO, and I think you should apply for it. You'd probably have to manage your salary expectations. I'm like, no, that's fine. I said, don't worry, wires were crossed. I will come across as long as I can get what I'm on now. I'll take a zero. I'm not fussed about that. I'll come across what I'm on now, and they rounded it up to the nearest 1,000. And that was it. So I was successful. Started the job January 2020.
That was a quiet year.
Yeah.
So you've gone from a can I say cushy government job?
Yeah.
Would that be a fair description?
In comparison,
with a bit of volunteering for an organisation to now, bam, you're the head of that organisation.
Yeah, it It was a huge jump. It was a huge jump. And look, I mean, first and foremost, all sucking up aside, the co-founders have done. They've had really two great impacts on my life. One is that it was really rudimentary, but they'd set up a great organization with a great set of principles and with a great purpose. Secondly, they gave me the support I needed, but also were really good at getting out of the way and letting me get on with it. And they were never overburdening at all, actually. And that was a real godsend, because I like to just get on and do my stuff and try to push some boundaries. And that meant that I didn't have any restrictions. But we were very well aligned. What I wanted for Techbets was exactly what the board had in mind. My strengths were stuff that they couldn't really give me, but my weaknesses were stuff where they could support me, which made me a good candidate for the role. Now, coming in, they'd only went live in March 18, and I started volunteering for them in October that year. So my journey with them had started not long after, they'd just kicked off, and a lot of my work as a volunteer had contributed to that progression over that 14-month period. So when I took it over, it was very new. Bootstrap technology. We had a rudimentary Discord server with 2 partnerships, one with Crest and one with Immersive Labs. And I came in and they said, look, it'd be good if you could give us your 30, 60, 90 plan, which I created, really chuffed with it. 3 weeks later, threw it in the bin because COVID hit. And but thankfully, at that point, we were almost entirely online. And one thing that I realised straight away is, actually, given that the Forces community, the whole point of Techbets was to get the Forces community to value their careers in the military, their experience and their skill set, and to see the benefit in accessing IT careers, tech careers. And most of them, the real problem is not unemployment, it's underemployment. So a lot of them are busy anyway. So actually, accessing stuff virtually in their own time is a lot easier, a lot more beneficial and accessible for those people that we were supporting. So I just had to work out what we needed to do. So I basically had, my year one was to get a good understanding of everything and to build our platform. And, you see these crazy builds and you understand yourself, having built companies, that when it starts out, that bootstrap technology approach is great. You've got to be innovative. And we built our learning management academy for about 7K with 2 freelance devs and a volunteer, and we did it in 6 weeks. That was probably the most challenging time of my life. Not necessarily the most tiring. That was the sort of big networking sort of period, but the most challenging, because I also took us into a merger with a larger Forces charity, the Forces Employment Charity, which we are now a program with them. And they're a great charity, but they are totally different. They're bigger. They're not as agile in the true sense of agile methodologies, which I'm definitely a fan of. I like to build fast, fail quickly, iterate, but also I like to be innovative, and you've got to be able to try stuff to know whether it's going to work. And the cultures were so different that was a real challenge. So I managed to get us into Force Employment Charity and build that academy in year one. I then set out a three-year strategy. The first of that 3-year strategy, which would have been my second year in the job, was about seeing what we could build, getting as much stuff in as possible for people to be able to upskill and get into jobs. Year 2 was build the team, and year 3 was really then dive down into the weeds of all the processes, systems, the data, to refine the user journey and improve the user journey and experience. And this is the 3rd year, and we've been doing that. We never have enough data. We never have as clean a data as you want, but we've made some great grounds. And I did. And within that year, during COVID, managed to build 32 strategic partnerships, all virtually. We have 20 companies providing training that's free, that would be inaccessible or at cost. And that's because people buy into what we want to achieve. And it's not a fast route into tech. It's not a 5-day bootcamp course. It's about upskilling. It's about leveraging that networking community to understand the careers and the skills and the jobs that are available, and where you want to go rather than where you think you should go based on based on what someone may have told you. At the end of my first year, I brought in Meredith as a consultant to do all the marketing. So she's effectively built the brand. Between the two of us, we kind of kicked it into gear, and yeah, when you're on your own doing it, it can be a lonely place. And I really lent on Mark Milton and the other three, Peter Connolly, Mike Butcher from TechCrunch, and Ewan Crawford. I lent on them for that guidance and support. I've always had other mentors as well, but I built a volunteer team. I thought, if I haven't got the money, but if I can leverage the military camaraderie in the military community, and I brought some incredible people in. Dave Grant was one of those who was the volunteer who helped me build the platform. The guy had 20 years experience working in Goldman's, left as a managing director, and then found that he was doing some IT support and building a WordPress academy with two freelance devs for me. But he gave me 3 to 5 hours a day, 5 days a week for 3 months. Incredible. That community is impressive. And we had all sorts coming in. We've got one of the guys heads up Microsoft's global threat hunting team. I mean, the stuff that we can drag from that community is fierce in experience and skills, and their willingness to give back. And that really helped me to start getting into motion some more operational activity and delivery. We had the training stuff there. The academy was there to improve how people could access that training. And then in the year 2, I managed to get enough funding to bring in a team, which was part of that. That was what the year 2 of that 3-year strategy was all about. I brought in Colin, who's 24 years experience in the RAF, and years in the education system, creating digital platforms for learning. So he came in as the head of sort of training and coordination on training stuff, career pathways. Rachel, who's 12 years in the RAF, she's now training specialist. So all of us are veterans. Meredith is also a military spouse. But what's really nice, what I love about that military background, generally speaking, is that attitude to just, I can give people something in the distance to aim for, and I don't have to get in there. I can just empower them to do that, and off they go. They get on with it. And it's a really nice grown-up environment. The team are passionate. And we're now in a good place, and we're ready for the next. We're just about to have a session next month to discuss the next 3 years.
Exciting times. Do you want to, for anyone who's not familiar with Techbets, do you want to tell us what Techbets does?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're a program within the Forces Employment Charity. So there's no monetization of it at all. We rely on charity grants and philanthropic donations or companies' foundational arms for funding. So there's no hooks, there's no deception there. We have 3 core areas that you can access for support. One of those is the community, 4,000 plus members, all in an online community platform, Discord. And you can access 20% of those are veterans and military spouses who are already in IT careers, who offer their experience straight from the horse's mouth, living and breathing those roles on a daily basis that just want to give back. No sales pitching, no one's got skin in the game. You can access loads of free training, everything from sort of project management, UX design, digital marketing. We've got IT support and infrastructure training, data analytics, business intelligence, data engineering, and cybersecurity. And then we've got some programming and low code, and all of that is self-paced. Most of it is self-paced, online. All of it's online training, all free. And then the employment support stuff. We've got a CV distribution service through our partnership with Crest, which gets CVs out to over 100 companies, Crest companies across the UK, and a jobs board where companies chuck their jobs in for 0 fees, and because they want to grab more talent from the community. But you also get those warm referrals as well through the ready-made network that we have in that Discord server. So it's there. It's all about empowering people, showing them the doors are there. They've just got to put in the legwork, do the upskilling, do the networking, and make it happen. But it is all about taking that military experience, the skills, and the valuable ads that they can have to businesses, and putting them in direct contact with those businesses to improve the UK's digital economy is the end goal. So if you head to www.techvets.co, you'll get to our main webpage, hit the registration, and off you go. Once you register, you'll get a nice welcome email. There's an onboarding session email that you'll get after that as well to get you into an onboarding session with my team. And from that point, the world's your oyster.
Fantastic. So if you were to have a conversation with someone who's coming up to the end of their military career, what would be the advice that you would give to them?
So first and foremost, do your research. You've got to really dig into your reasons for leaving. If it is an end of career because it's end of contract, then that's slightly different. But if you're making the proactive decision to leave, then really consider why you're leaving, and even down to the point where are your normal employment needs being met. Once you've done that, the research has to step into a sort of next gear, and you've got to really start looking at what you want to do, because it's easy just to follow a traditional pathway or do something that you think would be good because you've heard the salaries are great, and focus on what it is that you like to do in a job, the sort of skills you like to use, the responsibilities you'd like to have, because there's no standardization outside the military. So if you focus on a job role specifically or a job title, you're going to be absolutely in the dark from one company to the next. And when you're looking at tech, don't look at just big tech companies, traditional tech companies, because every company is a tech company. Everyone requires technology, using technology, underpinned by technology. So think about what industries you want to go into and why. And if you've got a passion, for example, for renewable energy, there's loads of tech careers there. Supermarkets have the biggest e-commerce platform, so it's not just stacking shelves. F1 is absolutely underpinned by data platforms that are shaving hundreds and hundreds of split seconds off of times. So do your research. As part of that, network like something possessed, but have a targeted approach. Start broad but really focus, and have a log what sort of networking you do so you have a strategy and a plan about it. But it's important, and do it for the right reasons. Do it for knowledge building and work that network. Become a value add to that network, because you're able to start introducing other people to others within your network, which then broadens yours and has you more valuable as part of other people's networks. What I would also suggest is build up your knowledge. You've got great podcasts, like this. Quick plug, great podcast. But there are loads. And podcasts aren't necessarily for everyone. Other people like to read or watch video content or whatever, or whatever. Whatever it is, you've got to learn. You've got to start understanding what's happening in the tech world, where the trends are, what's the emerging technologies, what's it going to look like in 5 years' time. So you're not planning your career for a job now. You're starting to plan ahead for where it's going to go, and that will help you with everything from your networking to your upskilling, to your job selection. But definitely try to get into companies as well. Walk around inside. You'll get a feel for what their culture's like from the inside. You'll see what their office is like, and you'll understand what that commute is going to be like. And then I suppose finally, don't have low ceilings. The benefit outside the military is arguably the ceilings are almost of your own creation, rather than in the military they're sort of forced upon you. There is no such thing as rank, and position doesn't give you the ability to progress. Your outputs, your network, and your value that you add in work is where the real true credit is, if you've joined the right company anyway. And I would say that the vast majority are companies that will absolutely credit you for your value add. And with that in mind, when you're looking at job specs, if you like a job, go for it. The worst you're going to get is no. And that's something that I've done loads of. When I was leaving, I would aim for jobs just because they were kind of sexy kind of roles in companies I wanted to join, and I liked the sound of it all. When I looked at whether I ticked a lot of it off, sometimes I didn't tick hardly any off, and I still got through to interviews. I got offers. Sometimes I turned them down. And I think when you're looking at that sort of approach, you're more likely to land a role that you're going to enjoy. If you're ticking off everything on a job spec, then you're not right for that job because you're already doing that job. You should only be really ticking off some of that job spec anyway, and you should aim big because you'll be absolutely shocked at how much you can achieve. And leverage the military network. That's the I suppose the last point. It's an incredibly strong one. Very rarely you're going to get in touch with a veteran who's not going to get back to you, or at least try to connect you with someone else. So definitely leverage that network.
Yeah, I didn't engage with the veteran network for quite a while after I left. But since I have, what an amazing group of people I've met who've just got incredible story after incredible story, which is what led to doing this podcast. So I was like, wow, I was blissfully unaware of how many vets are out there absolutely smashing it.
Yeah.
And I thought they're great stories to tell. So
I mean, look, I live every single day with an element of imposter syndrome. At the night time, I'm waking up and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I can't do that. Can I do that? I've been at a table with Ruth Porat, the CFO of Google and Alphabet, and at times I think, Christ, how have I come from being a full screw, an injured full screw in the infantry, to this point now? But along the way, there's been so many members of the veteran community that have been part of that journey. If you know you've got those people to sort of lean on every now and then, actually it becomes incredibly easy in many regards. But you've got that resilience, and I think that it's such a tight community in general. You've got all that support, you've got all the background, you've got loads of soft skills, you've got an upbringing in the military that no one else is going to really have outside of the military. So the world is your oyster, and I think if you tap into that military community, there's always people that want to help.
Yeah, that's actually something that I don't think you can emphasize enough. The amount of people that have gone out, smashed it, and they're literally looking to help other people.
Yeah.
Do the same thing. People like Ben Legg, I remember he reached out to me on LinkedIn and just offering assistance.
Yeah.
It was like great to see other military entrepreneurs, and I was like, who's this guy? I scroll through his profile and see COO of Google Europe, and I was like, wow.
Yeah.
And then see that he was a Royal Engineers captain, and and I just messaged back, let's go for breakfast, and he was like, yeah, cool, let's do that.
Yeah.
And I went and met this like hugely successful guy who then introduced me to loads of other people, and just amazing what the community does for other members of the community.
Yeah, it's incredible. But I've been lucky to meet some really. I mean, one of my mentors at one point was a guy called Mike Pegg, who's he's the founder of the Positive Encourager. The guy's got decades and decades and decades of experience working with people on their strengths, everywhere from sort of Borstal to sort of big tech, and people call him the wizard because he's got sort of like white grey hair, and he's just almost has this magic about him. The way he can dive into it. I remember having a FaceTime call. It was my second interview for Techbets, and he said, "We're going to just talk about your strengths," and we spoke for about 2 minutes about my family life and a few other things, nothing really work related. And he said, right, so here's your strengths, rattled them all off, knew me inside and out, and knew more about me than I did about my strengths within 3 minutes talking about what I thought was superfluous stuff. I've been very lucky, but I think if you really push, those opportunities are there. And I've had a very exciting, very interesting career, I suppose, and I've been very lucky to have that sort of mindset, that coming from that dark day when I got hit, that being actually the best thing that ever happened to me in my adult life, purely because that forced that change that then led me on to all the stuff since. So I think, I think there is so much out here in the wide world, and tech is just incredible. The stuff that's going on in tech over the last 5 years and for the next 20 years, it's going to be incredibly exciting. Great companies, great technologies, lots of cool social impact with digital. I think it's a really exciting time to be around tech, that's for sure.
Yeah, I do want to comment. I've never met someone with such a structured approach to deliberate networking. That's
yeah. I was always very unique, I suppose, in that I knew that I was always going to be medically discharged from that sort of 5-6 year point out from leaving, and I only left a matter of sort of 3 years before when I would have officially left on my end of 22-year contract. Anyway, but that mindset shift was something different, and I realised that if I didn't have a plan for it, I would spend 5 years going down all sorts of rabbit holes rather than starting broad and gradually focusing into that sort of point where I exit successfully. So that ended in the last quarter of the year that I left, and I started my job in November in that quarter. So it was literally down to the exact quarter in the plan. In the last year, I mean, that was almost circumstance. I wasn't really aiming for that. That was like the start goal. I said, right, by this point, I will have a plan ready to go. But yeah, and that was it. So even down to the quarter. But it just goes to show, if you have a plan, you research, you work hard, you network well, anything's possible. Anything's possible. It's not easy. I mean, crikey, I'm very lucky. My wife is incredible. I've put an inordinate amount of hours in, and sort of 90-hour weeks for the first 8 months of Techbets, for example, it's not sustainable, you know. So you've got to be able to do it on that surge. Get ready to put the legwork in, and if you do it right, you get the downtime at some point. I'll get that down. I've got a week off next week, which is good.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
James, it's been an absolute joy to talk to you today. Thank you so much for coming on and for sharing your experiences.
Oh, look, my pleasure. Look, it's great. It's nice to share a positive message. I think there's lots of people that haven't had quite such personal success. So yeah, look, it's been great. Awesome.
Thanks a lot. Cheers.
Take care.